Sometimes life knocks us down, but you're only one step away from everything changing. Asterisk, he was an ordinary man, living in an ordinary town. But to those who knew him, he had something that made him stand out, his smile. It was a smile that could light up the darkest of rooms, a smile that never wavered, no matter how dire the situation. People often said that he had a special quality about him, something that made them believe everything would be okay, even when they saw his life unraveling before their eyes. He lived in a small, modest house on the outskirts of town with his wife and their 2 young children. He had always been someone who believed in doing everything for his family. From the moment he had become a father, his world had shifted. It was no longer about his own dreams, his own aspirations. It was about providing, about making sure his family had everything they needed. But despite his best efforts, things never seemed to work out. Every business he tried to start failed. Every plan he made crumbled under the weight of reality. It was as though the universe had conspired against him, placing obstacle after obstacle in his path. Yet he never let his smile fade. Even when his pockets were empty and his future uncertain, he remained hopeful. His wife was his greatest supporter, but even she had her moments of doubt. She could see the strain on his face, the sleepless nights, the frustration as he tried and failed. Again. "Maybe you should take a break," she suggested gently one evening. As they sat together at the small dining table, the remnants of their meager dinner still untouched. "You've been working non-stop. Maybe it's time to reassess, to find another way." He smiled at her, brushing off the concern. "I can't stop. I have to keep trying. For you, for the kids. I promised you all I would make things better. I'll find a way. I always do." But deep inside, he was struggling. His self-doubt crept in every day. He would wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and wonder if he was enough. Could he ever truly provide for his family? Would he ever succeed? Or was he destined to be stuck in this endless cycle of disappointment? His family, too, started to feel the weight of his endless pursuit. They loved him dearly, but even his children, who adored their father, couldn't help but notice the stress that had begun to seep into their once joyful household. His efforts, though noble, were starting to feel like they were tearing his family apart, not bringing them closer together. The tension grew, slowly at first. His wife no longer greeted him with the same warmth. The kids, while still affectionate, seemed distant. He could feel the strain in their interactions. Everyone was trying to be supportive, but the cracks were beginning to show. The financial pressure, the missed opportunities, and the constant striving without results was starting to take their toll. His friends too began to pull away. He had always been the one to offer a helping hand, to encourage others, but now it felt like the roles had reversed. His friends were starting to feel sorry for him, offering sympathy that only made him feel worse. "Maybe it's time to give up," one suggested after a long, unsuccessful attempt at securing a business loan. "Maybe you should just accept that things aren't going to change. You've done your best, but sometimes it's better to walk away." He didn't respond. He simply nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. He had heard this advice before, but the words never reached him. Walking away was never an option in his mind. He had always believed that no matter how hard life got, if he kept moving forward, kept pushing, things would eventually change. He had seen it happen in other people's lives. Why couldn't it happen in his? But that night, as he lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, he couldn't escape the feeling that maybe, just maybe, The suggestion was right. Was he wasting his time? Was it time to give up? The days blurred together for him. They felt like a series of endless, repetitive motions where nothing changed, no matter how hard he tried. Morning would arrive, and he would get up early, still tired, but determined to push through. He had a routine. He had to. There was always something to do, another meeting to attend, another project to start, another idea to work on. Yet each attempt seemed more futile than the last. Every time he thought he had found a way, life would throw something unexpected in his path. The bills kept coming. The phone calls from creditors became more frequent, their voices more demanding. The business ventures he had poured his heart into slowly withered. Clients stopped calling, partners pulled out, and even the most hopeful prospects began to fade away. No matter how hard he worked, the weight of failure was starting to break him down. He tried to explain his frustrations to those closest to him, but they only looked at him with sympathy in their eyes, as if they had already given up on him in their hearts. No one said it outright, but he could feel it, the disappointment in their silent glances, the lingering worry in their voices. Even the closest relationships seemed strained, as though they were beginning to wonder whether the dream was worth the cost. The endless pressure began to take its toll on his physical health. He would wake up in the morning with a pounding headache, barely able to keep his eyes open, but he would force himself out of bed anyway. The fatigue gnawed at him, yet he kept pushing forward. It wasn't just his own dreams that were at stake. Anymore, it was his family's future. He couldn't afford to give up. He couldn't afford to let them down. One evening after another, failed attempt at securing a new business opportunity. He sat alone in the living room, staring at the pile of rejection letters scattered across the table. It was late, well past midnight. His family had already gone to bed, unaware of the storm of thoughts that had been raging inside him for hours. He sat there, looking at the empty space in front of him, his mind spinning. "Why can't I do this?" he whispered to himself, the words barely audible in the quiet room. "Why does it always feel like I'm just one step behind, no matter how hard I try?" He leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes, the weight of exhaustion settling over him like a heavy blanket. The doubt crept in, the nagging feeling that perhaps he wasn't meant to succeed. Maybe he wasn't cut out for this after all. Maybe all the effort, all the work, had been for nothing. A deep sense of defeat threatened to consume him. But just as it seemed that everything was falling apart, he heard a voice. It wasn't loud or commanding, just a simple, steady voice that seemed to speak directly to him. "Don't give up yet." He looked around, but no one was there. The room was empty, and the stillness seemed to mock him. "Who's there?" he asked, standing up from the chair, his pulse quickening. There was no answer. It wasn't the first time he'd heard something like this uninternal voice, a gut feeling, a whisper of intuition. He had always believed that these moments were just fleeting thoughts, nothing more than fleeting doubts or fleeting hope. But tonight, the words felt different. They felt like a message, a reminder, urging him not to give in to despair. He took a deep breath, shaking off the unease that had settled in his chest. He had been at his lowest points before. This was no different. The challenges were the same. The obstacles were still there. But there was one thing that set him apart from others. He refused to let go of his hope. No matter how faint it seemed, the struggle of the past few months had weighed heavily on him, more than he cared to admit. It was becoming clear that no matter how hard he worked, success seemed just out of reach, and every attempt left him feeling more drained. The days blended into each other, one failure after another. the hope he clung to slipping further and further away. It was another morning like any other. The sun barely peeked over the horizon as he walked down the familiar, worn path toward the marketplace. His shoes, once sturdy and reliable, now felt like they were barely holding together. The same routine, the same people, the same disappointment. As he passed by the small shops, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. Would today be any different? He had barely noticed the figure sitting by the side of the road at first. It was a man, perhaps in his late 70s, wearing a simple white kurta, his hair mostly grey, and his face weathered with age. The man seemed to be waiting for something, or perhaps just passing the time. As he walked by, something in the old man's eyes caught his attention. There was a calmness there, something that contrasted sharply with his own inner turmoil. Without thinking, he stopped. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the quiet, inviting presence the old man radiated, in a world where everyone was always in a hurry. This stranger seemed to have all the time in the world. The man noticed him immediately, his eyes twinkling as he gave a warm, knowing smile. "You look like you've been through a lot, my friend," the old man said, his voice soft but sure. He was taken aback by the comment. He hadn't spoken to anyone that day, and yet this stranger seemed to understand exactly what he was feeling. I guess I have," he replied, unsure of why he was talking to this stranger. The old man nodded as though he expected that answer. Life has a way of testing us, doesn't it? The more we try, the more it seems to knock us down. But you see, my friend, it's not about how many times you fall, it's about how many times you get back up. There was a strange calmness in his words. It was as though the old man had experienced all the hardships life could offer and had found a way to accept them, without bitterness,